All right, the back of the notes, we are dealing with trig integrals. So, like I said yesterday, these are some that you're going to need to remember. And if you remember the trig derivatives, this shouldn't be too bad. But I put them up at the top just as a reminder. So an example like number 1, remember the property we talked about yesterday, if we have a constant out in front of our function on the inside, we can actually take that and bring it outside. So we can think of this as negative 1/5 times the antiderivative of sine of u du. So that constant can just stay out in front, and we multiply it by the antiderivative of sine of u. So antiderivative of sine, of course we can see it here, but you can also think this through. You have to think to yourself, what do we take the derivative of that gives us sine? Or the derivative of what function is sine? Well, we should remember from trig derivatives that derivative of cosine is negative sine. So to get a positive sign, we'd have to be taking the derivative of negative cosine. So that's how we can kind of get this. Since it's a negative cosine and this one's a negative 1/5, we can multiply those to get a positive 1/5 cosine of u, oops, plus c. Now, just like before, and the problems on the front page, sometimes we need to rewrite things before we can make it work and make it easy to do the antiderivative of. We don't have any or know any antiderivatives of something with 1 over secant of x, right? We need to get our integral, the inside, at least part of it, to look like one of these integrals up here, one of the things that we already know. So right now, having a secant in the denominator, not one of our options. Now, the 1/4 part, that part we can actually go ahead and, since that's like a constant, we can take that out in front. But what we can also do is rewrite secant. So if we have 1 over secant, all right, so let's start this here, 1/4 times 1 over secant of x. Right, even by taking that 1/4 out, this inside's still not looking like something we can do the antiderivative of. But just from some trig identities that we should know, 1 over secant is the same as cosine. So that constant still stays out in front. We need to figure out what's the antiderivative of cosine. So in other words, the derivative of what function comes out to be cosine. So derivative of sine is cosine, so the antiderivative of cosine is sine. So we get 1/4 sine of x plus c.